Welcome to Nostalgia Pilots, a Gundam the 8th MS Team podcast that loves the smell of napalm in the morning. I'm Hugh.
I'm Jurd.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Spence.
And we have come to the final episode of Gundam the 08th MS Team.
The unnecessary episode.
Yes, after last week's final episode, we do have a final episode entitled Last Resort. And it's really not a good resort. They don't have enough activities, there's not a bar. They're not going to make any business.
I mean, I feel like this whatever this thing is they call it, I can't remember what they call it in the cold open, where it's like, you kids, you got to get off here. We're going down with the ship. I'm like, is this like a Trump hotel? Like, is this like a yacht run by Trump? Like, because they're like immediately going down with the ship. Like, there's no defenses, no nothing. Like, it's sinking. Like, it's just down.
Based on the date, I mean, they're in the last big fight of the original Gundam series.
What?
And they've got some kids on here on their ship who are, we don't really say what they are, but they're important, and they're going to be important for the next war. So they sort of launch them in a big escape pod.
I figure they're like pre-gen Hiro, Yuri, and the rest of the pilots.
We don't get a ton of information on what their deal is, but I assume that there's some sort of either experiment to like understand what new types are, or to make fake new types, or something new type. Something space.
Isn't that the plot of not Destiny, but is it Double Zeta where they make the fake new types?
Destiny's about, or Seed and Seed Destiny are about genetic engineering, but yeah, I think it might be Double Zeta. And
also, because this what came out after Gundam Wing?
Yes. So this started in 96, and then it sort of went on for a couple of years. So it was in between Wing and Seed.
Yeah, see, I feel like they didn't get to talk about Dorothy and her cloned family, so they just threw everything they had left over at the wall in this episode.
Oh yeah, like there's a bunch of weird clone shit. There's a bunch of weird clone shit in the notes for Gundam Wing that never comes up.
Yeah, if you read the novelizations they have, Dorothy is actually a clone. And there was them. They were basically trying to create. Let's be real, because it's Xeon. They were trying to clone Hitler, basically, and that's where Dorothy's family came from. And Dorothy was kind of like the success story? ? She eventually does become like president of Earth, but that's another series. Yeah,
well, this felt like another series. It felt like they were trying to backdoor an episode, like a launch into an entirely different run. I was like, are we getting a second season? And it's just these kids, and we're like, no, we're just cutting out. It's done. In fact, not only does it just cut out, at one point they're like, maybe these kids didn't even exist. Maybe they're just ghosts. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay,
no, because what happens is, like, after we see the escape pod, like, head towards Earth, we cut immediately to Apocalypse Now, but it's a buddy comedy between Mikael and Kiki.
Alcoholic.
Yeah, trying to turn Michel into the grizzled, hard, like, traveling one of them was the worst decision.
Well, I think it's on purpose, though, because he's immediately terrible at it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't even have facial hair. Like, come on. Like, at least Sanders would have been a perfect choice. Like, he's just disillusioned from the war. He lost his commander. He thought he was in a different type of unit.
This should have been Sanders and Karen. This should have been Sanders and Karen.
I think what they wanted was, like, to have Michel and Kiki have some closure together to kind of hint at, and then these two may go off and do things together. Like, that whole scene where they're all wrapped up and Kiki's got all the kids around her. I'm just like, aw. So they end up adopting a bunch of kids and living in a house in the woods.
I also kind of thought it was going that way, yeah. But no.
That would have been a better ending.
Wait, Swiss Family Robinson, the new types? Is that what we're doing here?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I don't know why it wasn't Sanders and Karen. Like, I don't know why it was these two specifically. Like, I get that we didn't get a lot of closure with Girl from the Gorillas, but no one wanted more Michel.
Like, I think it's because they're the young characters. Like, they may have been actually, like, popular in Japan.
I don't know. I do like, though, how Kiki pretty much just yanks Bebe's picture out of Mikel's hand, rips it up, and just like, get over her, which is what we've all been screaming every time he writes a letter to Bebe.
Okay, so we need to talk about this picture, because if you did not see this, the picture is of, like, of Bebe in a wedding dress with presumably her husband, and they already have a baby. So, like, that baby was born out of wedlock, and it is maybe like 3 months after the war ended.
Listen,
so
he got the worst type of Dear John letter. Like, he got the worst.
Well, no, she gave him the Dear John letter 6 episodes ago, and he just, like, didn't pay attention to it, I guess.
But what I don't get is, like, how you going to send him a picture of you married with a baby when that baby came while you were supposed to be with him?
Yeah, like
savage. Like,
and my favorite thing is that, like, he didn't even, like, stab out the dude's picture or, like, burn his face off. It's just, like, scribbled at Sharpie. Like, Michel can't even manage to, like, hate the dude who is having sex with his girlfriend properly. And all we know is that he was discharged for reasons. Like, we don't get into it.
Well, he says later that he's retired.
You know, for his first reaction, though, upon receiving that letter, was to turn to his notebook and write, "Dear Bebe, you'll never believe the letter I just got."
What if Bebe was never actually betrothed to him this whole time, or interested in him? Like in the Princess and the Frog, there's this guy who wants to dance with one of the main characters, and she goes, "Travis, when a woman says later, she means not ever." And so I'm wondering if that's how that relationship was. And so Michel was like, "Yeah, I'm totally dating this girl," and this girl's like, "I never said I was dating you."
Maybe when you get back from the war. That's it. The answer I needed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe he joined to try to impress her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe this is so much more interesting backstory than what we actually got.
I'm a genius. It's okay. Anyway, moving on.
So they're apocalypsing now it upriver in a boat, and they eventually come to a spaceship that we've seen before.
I want to know how long it's been since this escape pod landed, because these kids have set up like a whole like community. Like they've got like shelter, and they're like giving funerals, like.
But they're not giving funerals well, and they look mostly the same age, so I'm guessing it's maybe been a year.
Maybe.
Like
the most thing that we see is that they've got clothes hanging on a line. And that they do build graves, but they don't hold funeral processions. And that's Kiki's whole thing.
They've collected quite a number of Xeon dog tags as well, so I suppose that would have taken a while to...
Yeah, you know.
My assumption was that those were the dog tags from all the people in the ship that they were jettisoned from.
See,
that would make sense.
I mean, to be fake new types, because let's be real, they're not, by letter of the law, psychic children should be considered new types. But one thing we've seen previously in the other series about new types is new types, they pick up on things really quickly. Like, I think these kids would have probably figured out a way to like fix this ship with all the discarded, full mobile suits lying around.
Well, so they're less new types and more Akiras, basically.
Oh, God. Don't make them angry, or they'll turn into blobs and eat your city. Or the jungle, in this case.
The other thing they come across is a box of floppy disks here in the future. That just have the name Flanagan on them. Because, you do your secret, illegal medical research on children and then label all your disks.
With your name. That's what you write.
I'm
Dr. Flanagan's property on all 80 copies of.
I'm not doing any ego experimentation. Well, you do have a Rolodex full of floppy disks with your name, date, and the child you said you cloned. Oh no. That's fake news. You don't know that. No. But sir, your name is you spell it this way, correct? With the little squiggly at the bottom of the G.
So until this episode, I've never felt like we got a very commercial structure, like in the sense of them coming up against a commercial break, which you would always feel in Gundam Wing, right? Like they'd have like the break and then they come back.
Catch.
Yeah. I didn't feel that way in any of these episodes until we got to, I guess there's a storm coming, and then waking up on the boat and having been captured at that point.
Right.
Like,
so this is the first time that Michel is overwhelmed by children.
But that was the first time I felt like, that's where the commercial break went. They were like, the storm's coming. Cut to commercial. Wake up on the boat.
Yeah, we do get like a very nicely animated sort of sequence of them sleeping in the cockpit of this abandoned shuttle, and like we see them through the window as the rain's coming down, and that was nice, I thought.
Yeah, I'm surprised this had as good of animation as it did for how slapdash and kind of secondary thought, attached this to the show. It felt like I don't think they had planned to make this episode. So I'm surprised the animation looks as good as it did.
I definitely have some thoughts on that when we get into sort of the more overall series commentary that we're going to get into kind of at the end of the episode. At this point, even when the children originally come in, how did you feel about the collection of children as such as they were? The creepy twins, the one black character that we've been introduced to this entire episode, series.
So,
was there another black person?
Kid in the helmet. I think it's definitely a series of tropes that they ticked the boxes for.
Yeah, creepy twins standing at the door. Check.
You gotta have both of you talking about clones.
Mm-hmm. The hyper violent child who believes that no one can take his name. The children who are far more serious than they should be because they are children. And the one useless one who doesn't want to see anybody cry or see them cry.
Yeah, definitely, I think that the child in the military helmet that's way too big for him is also a specifically Japanese trope of this.
Because that helmet does vaguely look like a samurai helmet.
It does.
I also do have to give this credit for Kiki's response to these kids. She grew up in this type of atmosphere and world, and this kind of, being older than you're having to be older than you actually are to survive type thing. And I feel like the way she responds to these kids, but as well as how they respond to her, is far more accurate to her and her character than any of this is to Michel. If you wanted to give this whole episode as her and without him in it, I think it would have been better. I think it would have been much better.
She's way more competent of the two in that she is in any stretch competent.
But she's also been more competent than Michel throughout the series, so this does not surprise me.
Her finding the children feels like actually an almost decently written arc for her character, in the sense that she's lost her village and now she's looking for something else. We all can agree Michel's in no position to be a dad yet. But I couldn't really buy yet why she was even bothering looking for the commander, other than she happened to know Michel, but she didn't really know him because it wasn't like they hung out. She hung out with Shiro, and she didn't really, mesh with the rest of them.
Michel was the only one who went looking. The rest of them scattered.
Yeah, I just don't understand why she went looking. Michel, okay.
I have the feeling that
Michel had a big crush on Shiro.
Yeah. I think Michel showed up drunk in wherever she's living now, and is I'm gonna find the commander, and she's like, you are going to boat into the jungle and die.
I will take care of you.
Fine. Another example of the series presenting us an incompetent dude who's only surviving because the lady's helping him along.
Yes.
And you know what? She does have I'd like also the skirmish she kind of has with the one kid who is kind of their leader, and he's got the little spear, and you can definitely it's almost as if she feels like this is her, right? Like this is what she would have been if she didn't have her dad or didn't have her friends or the family she kind of had because of the gorillas. Like again, well written for her, not so much for Michel. And throughout most of this part, there's not much from him anyway.
Well, I mean, if they didn't have him as the foolish dichotomy, or the foolish foil to her empathy, I think it would have been a very self-righteous kind of episode as to, hey, look, I'm a foreigner and these are children who are victims of war. I'm going to take care of them now and swoop in and rescue them. So having Michel there as kind of a counterpoint to that, even though he fails at everything, really tones down that look at me being amazing theme.
Yeah. And I the thing I really like is the way that she sort of treats them very seriously. Even though, like as if they are soldiers, even though they're like clearly 8
or younger.
Yes, in some cases, very much younger.
Like she teaches them how to play house. She teaches them how to play. I think that is hugely important.
Like, and she, and they get captured, and then she's immediately the person that's like, oh, they left a fire here. Let's just burn our ropes and escape.
Yeah, even when she's seriously threatened by the guy with the knife spear, she just breaks the spear and basically takes him down. Like, could have probably overwhelmed them at any point.
And then she's like, I'm not going to take your name. Like, no one can take your name. But because
we have yet to reveal the secret. They're all named after characters previously on the show.
Yeah.
Yes. So apparently what happens is that that Aina and Shiro, the originals, found these children, taught them how to survive. The children didn't have names, so they gave them these names. They gave them the names of Karen, Sanders, Michel, Aina, Shiro, and Elidor. There's an Elidor as well, and a Kiki. So they gave them all these names, and I think that's really powerful, considering that when we watched Gundam Wing Zero, all of those pilots' names were also given to them from other people, like Hiro Yui and everything. So yeah, I can see why that would be very moving for them, because they hadn't been named, and if they've been raised in that laboratory, they may have just been assigned numbers. Who knows?
Yeah, we do see a flashback of them get under these experiments, and like we just see like these blank sheets of paper with their pictures, and then it just has the word erased scrawled upon it. And it's like very kind of chilling in that like late 90s anime, this is a weird medical experiment kind of way. But they do see them like holding a funeral for one of the children that have died, but they don't like understand how to do it. They're just sort of aping something they saw Shiro and Aina do, like after they had found them. Like they had buried their clothes and sort of made fake graves for themselves so they could like disappear. And then they're sort of like putting this child in a hole, but they're just sort of like dumping dirt on them. And that's when Kiki's like, no, this is how you have a funeral. And like they fill the grave with flowers, and she and Michel say prayers and like teach them how to do all that stuff.
See, like this is why it's so silly to do this whole like they weren't real, thing. Like, because you can go look and find that grave. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, Michel's kind of dumb, but to be fair, Michel has like several concussions at that point, because the next thing that happens is one of the kids hits him in the face with a shovel.
It's great. Like, again, he shouldn't have been in this episode. Anyone else? Like, just imagine, or better yet, make it Kiki and Sanders. Like, so that way there's no way there's a love story, right? And then it's Sanders helping her with these kids, and he's kind of finding his humanity again, kind of, distancing himself from the war type of thing. Like,
yeah,
But
Mhm.
yeah, but why Michel? Like, why him? Of all,
Yeah,
just
really.
have him marry Bebe and never be in the show again.
So the kids do disappear, but not before revealing important info that the commander and Ina have gone north, which is a vague sort of direction, but apparently enough that they can figure it out. So they continue north, and
But before that, it snows, because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
always
So
snowing
magical.
in the
In Vietnam.
Vietnam jungle.
okay, as dumb as the sequence was, I actually quite liked that they used the Zaku's power generation to basically make a hot pool and all go
Yes.
swimming. That was a nice
That's
little.
the other thing that Shiro and Ina taught them is how to use your laser sword to make a hot spring.
But then
So yes, the kids disappear into the jungle. They move north, and then we get the triumphant reveal of Shiro and Ina, and Ina's visibly pregnant, and they're both animated and quite a bit older. And that's the end. Really, this whole episode has just been filling time for the last 10 seconds of animation.
Well, but it's like, yeah, it shows them still alive, but they don't get any lines of dialogue, and it's pretty much the exact same ending to the series. Is that yep, they're still alive. Credits.
also, how does he have a leg? I'm pretty sure.
doesn't.
No, he doesn't. He
Does
has
he?
one leg.
He has
No,
one leg.
Okay, because he looked like he stood up.
Well, he has a crutch.
He had a crutch on him.
I was about to say he needs combat damage.
But they also had a really nice house, cabin that they had presumably built, and
Ina probably made that whole thing.
and their clothes were really nice. Shiro has long hair and a purple turtleneck. He looks like he's
He looks like an art teacher.
yeah, he looks like an art teacher. He looks like an art teacher who maybe runs a tiny local gallery in a suburb
And
on the weekends.
what's worse still,
Online shopping.
who cares about Shiro and Ina? I would have. I've said them so many times this episode, but Sanders and Karen,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what those characters are doing.
So,
Yeah, well,
what would
although-
you like to see those characters be doing?
International art thieves?
Loop. So wait, can they not be Lupin and Fujiko? Can we make Sand? Oh no, Sanders would definitely be Jigen. He would definitely be Jigen. Anything they could be. He could have started a pizzeria.
I'm going to say big city cops. She's all business, he's all laughs. He's had a change after the war. He's all comedy now.
Nice. And this is how Brooklyn Nine-Nine got started.
Yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but it's Pat LeBur.
Oh,
Okay.
I'd watch that. Okay, so here's a question for you guys. What do you think happens to these kids? Because 8th MS Team is in the core universe of Gundam series. It's not like Gundam. It's not like G Gundam. It's not like Gundam Wing. It's in the core storyline. The what's it? The Central Universe.
Universal Century, yeah.
Yeah, Universal Century. So what happens to them? Do they just wander off into the jungle forever? Do they come back?
They went to a different room in that house. It's a trap door. They got cold, so they all decided to huddle down there and leave the adults upstairs because they couldn't wake them up. They thought they were dead. And then all of a sudden, the adults are gone, and the kids are like, "Were they ghosts?"
Yeah, I mean, 'cause there's fresh snow on the ground. If they had
100%.
walked off, there would have been footprints.
Yep. So the kids think the adults are ghosts. The adults think the kids are ghosts. Yeah.
It
So
was all an illusion.
that's what happened. It's canon. I have said
No.
it. My work is done.
No, they all started new lives in a new world.
Oh man.
Clearly, that's what happened.
You know what? I would love it if Gundam had the forethought to have in later series in the Universal Century to have some of these characters, right?
Okay.
To see them as older characters.
I'm going to say something that's probably extremely cursed, but there is this one background character in, I've been watching Gundam Unicorn, which is set Universal Century 96, so it's exactly where the next generation of children would be teenagers to be thrown into giant robots.
Yeah.
And there is a kid in Banagir's class who has like Elidor's hair, but it's red.
Oh no!
I'm like,
Oh,
no.
No!
Not that.
Listen, it was like a Foreigner song. It was like a late night after a show. It was raining. And
like Karen didn't tell Sanders until she was 3 months pregnant already, and Sanders was a good guy, so he was like, "I'll raise it with you anyway," and that's how it goes.
That is assuming that Sanders is straight, which
So
you don't have to be in an intimate relationship with somebody to have to raise a kid together if you guys are that close.
fair.
I want to see this buddy cop show afterwards. I feel like that's what would have built that true bond. Like they had the initial bond in war, and then afterwards they helped each other through their traumas and things, and also to make fun of Shiro for being a dumbass.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. So before we get too far away from the other children, I just wanted to say that, okay, well, A, this is obviously just a nonsense staple on at the end of the series, almost unnecessary. But B,
almost.
Well, I kind of thought it would have been interesting. All right, and this may be actually leading us into sort of the overall opinion of the series itself. My overall opinion of the series is that it's beautifully animated in a lot of places, and the time they took to do so was not backed up with the time they took to plot it. And that the plotting is heavily uneven. All of the good stuff happens like in the last third of the show or so. Mm-hmm. And if they had used these kids in any sort of sensical fashion, like the mystery of the kids' names, who they are, whatever, you could have threaded this as the thing that introduces the whole rest of the show, and then have every other sequence in the show a flashback telling some different story, and then eventually maybe like revealing the kids are named after them or something. Like just some other kind of introduction and using this setup where all of these kids are named after the squad in any sort of interesting fashion. It felt like they didn't take the time at the whiteboard to just figure out what the actual speed and plotting of the show should be before they sat down and wrote it.
Yeah, actually, I think that is a problem with the series because it was, since it was an OVA that stretched over multiple years, like the actual creative director like switched a couple times on it. So it is not.
That would explain a lot.
Yeah, it is not a coincidence that is kind of uneven.
And it would also explain why this was such a short series. Because again, Gundams is one that the Gundam series as a whole are the ones that set the tone for having a 52 episode series. Like, there's only been either out of the shorter series, kind of like was it Stardust Memory and 8th MS Team. Those are the only ones you get are super short in design that way.
Yeah, and War in the Pocket.
Yeah, and then there was that one series that didn't get to finish because it was like the only Gundam series that got canceled like partway through. But the rest of them are 52 episodes or more across the board. Like, I mean, we've seen the original Mobile Suit, right? Like that's what it's a couple, like 100 and some episodes. It's out there. It's a while. That's why those movies are long.
Yeah, it just feels like a missed opportunity to have this short, kind of sweet approach to it. They know they're going to have a limited run on it. To have, you know, some really solid entries and some solid animation in places, and then to really drop the ball in others is really unfortunate.
Yeah, they do a good job to ground the Gundams, right? Like, having come from Gundam Wing, where basically you have, I'm the terror of death, and I've got a Gundam that's made of guns, and it's got guns on top of the guns. Like, to have these so grounded in this type of gritty combat is very good, and the animations are really great. I still remember, you know, when we watched that first episode where he fights the underwater Zaku. It's just a really, really good section of it. But your story is what's missing, and it's not even the whole story. It's like the connective tissue of the story. Like, you have great limbs and muscles here. You just need the stuff to move it around effectively, and they just drop the ball on that a lot across the series.
Undercooked.
But specifically for this episode, what are people's favorite parts?
Mine was absolutely the Zaku hot pool.
I was just sort of like, oh, that's a neat callback, but really, all these naked kids everywhere.
Well, yeah,
a little uncomfortable.
Hey, people thought it was endearing when it was it. People thought it was endearing and sweet and innocent and got the feel of Child Summer when they did it.
Yeah, I guess it was the way it was animated. I didn't feel like there was any of that awful lingering like there was earlier in the series.
Yeah, very much so. Because even Japan has to say, yeah, that's a bit creepy.
Yeah.
I would say Kiki tearing up that picture was
Yes.
my favorite moment. It's so savage because she's just like, bruh, get over it. I'm done with you whining. Like, it is so good.
Spence, what was yours? Your favorite?
I don't have one. I don't have one. This was the ending of the Return of the King in Lord of the Rings. It was completely unnecessary, and as endearing as there were some points in it, I don't have a favorite part because I spite watched it.
Fair.
Okay. My favorite part is definitely Michael getting hit in the face with a shovel, and then him following it up by stealing all the shovels so that the children could not sneak up on him a second time.
By the way, he gets wrecked by these kids every single time he has an opportunity to be anything other than a dunce. Like,
Yeah, I thought there was actually a little bit of subtle shade towards his character at the start when they're like, yeah, everyone else after the war had something to do except for me. Somehow I didn't continue on in service. They just let me go.
Yeah, like he's trying to project this sort of Heart of Darkness, Martin Sheen sort of gruffness, and then just immediately collapses like a souffle that's been made of a house of cards.
and you know what? Even Eleanor, we're like, oh, he's probably out there making weird country music. It's fine. Just anything to get rid of Michel. Anything at all.
I don't know if they mentioned if this was in the dub, but there's one part in the sub where they're talking about where did these children come from, and Michel says maybe they intentionally got shot, like Elidor did that one time. I was like, that was not intentional. He's just that bad at it.
Yeah, no, that was definitely in the dub.
Oh man, 8th MS team. Oh.
Although it was refreshing overall to go from Gundam Wing, where so many of the characters were unrealistically hyper competent, dropping people out of airplanes and shooting them and setting their own broken legs and
listen,
right.
The only way to make sure they're dead, you got to double tap.
And judging whether babies have enough will to live. To go to this series where the characters are very human and they're constantly screwing up and making bad decisions and getting in fist fights in wine cellars because they wanted to celebrate having a hit record.
Yeah.
Requesting their own songs on the radio from the military hospital.
I think it says something that going forward, the moments that are going to probably stick with me most from this run are the secondary characters that we really only saw for an episode or two, mm-hmm. who went out pretty quick. And most of them are the other, pilots. Shoot, I wish I could remember his name now. Ina's second.
Oh,
Norris.
Her father figure, Norris.
Yeah, Norris. Yeah, absolutely. His whole run, that whole setup, it won't be any of the main characters that I'm left thinking about when we're 3 more series in and still joking about wrenches. It'll be Norris in his last stand.
Yeah, I think Norris in that episode, all of the Norris fights were probably my favorite parts of this from a mecha action combat point of view.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wanted to know way more about Kiki's father and the guerrilla group. I think that would have been way more interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Gundam is known for taking reluctant heroes and putting them in Gundams. I mean, look at Iron Blood Orphans. Look at Stardust Memory. You have these characters that do that. Why couldn't let's say Sanders had been the pilot of the Gundam he gets wounded, tries to fight, can't, and reluctantly Kiki takes over the Gundam. And now she's been indoctrinated and pulled into the Federation because she's the only one that can pilot the Gundam, which is a thing that happens.
Well,
it responded to her. That's why she can pilot it. Like,
I was straight up expecting this episode to end with, and we built a mobile suit out of the parts of the Apsilus.
Brother's still alive with a cybernetic eye.
Yeah.
I think we do see a lot of sort of like the idea of the noble lost cause in Zeon in this series, when we have like Lieutenant Killarney and Norris going out there, and like and Ina trying to like keep all of the soldiers alive while Guineas is just feeding them meth so they'll build his robot faster.
Well, it does add an extra layer to the onion, I will say, when the history is pre-written. We already know what the war is, what the arc of the war is. So now they're writing characters against an inevitable end, so they can write a little extra depth and give them a little bit of that sort of latitude. Whereas, you know, when we're writing towards who's going to win, like, you've got to cook your characters in a different fashion.
When it's two pretty boys jumping at each other, yelling about philosophy that they don't really understand.
Exactly.
You know, and also, like, because this is the universal century, like, you do have, like you said, that inevitable end, right? Like, you have a lot of that, you know, the Bushido spirit, that samurai sort of code, where you know, you'll fight to the end for your honor no matter what. You know, look at Norris, you know, and that type of stuff in this, you know. I mean, even with Shiro, right? Like, he refuses to give up his moral compass that he somehow develops in like two episodes. And
right.
And he risks it all, right? Like, he loses a leg for it. He nearly loses the woman he has fallen in love with. He's lost his military career and has to live out in the woods like Grizzly Adams. You know, like, so it has that sort of honor and pride over logic sort of thing. Like, and so I think that comes with a lot of older anime because of the social economic standings and things of that, because of World War II and things like that. Like, it's also why you still see so much German and Nazi like imagery in a lot of things when there's villains. Like, and it's all through Gundam. Like, Zeon is just the Nazis. Like, throughout every franchise, they've never really changed. So, like, you see a lot of that type of imagery, that type of philosophy, you know, that sort of ideology when it comes to these things. I mean, especially with Amuro Ray and Char and the Zeta and Double Zeta stuff. Like, it's all over that intro stuff. That's why I find the non-universal century stuff the more interesting part of Gundam, because that's where you can be silly and fun and not be as super serious, when, you know, you can karate kick, you know, EMTs out of a van and have a good time with your wrench.
Definitely.
And no one drove a golden limo in this.
No, there weren't any like golden for no reason mobile suits in this, which we often also get.
Yeah. They're more powerful that way. But don't worry. They're going to get a golden Gundam in G Gundam. Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, we are.
Oh, yes. So, Spence, what about you? What did you think of the overall part of this? Like, because I know you aren't as familiar with Gundam as, like, the rest of us mech-loving losers. So, you know.
What did I think of the overall series?
The ladies were better than Relina?
Definitely better than Relina. I did like a lot more of the storytelling in this series than in Wing Zero, because like especially towards the latter half of the series, I was way more invested in what's going to happen, even though there were these great secondary characters where they didn't make it to another episode. The storytelling was a lot better, in my opinion. Did I like the story? I think it's just the communications portion of it, where like that was my job. what Elidor was doing was my job, and I just wanted to beat him constantly, so it probably distracted me a lot. A lot. So, yeah.
Yep.
I don't think I was able to fully enjoy it because of that.
Which is kind of weird because a show that, well, not so much this series, but certainly Gundam Wing, a show that feels not so Mary Sue-ish, but they're definitely supposed to be power projections for a certain, male age group. And then you actually do have a character that you can sort of really, associate yourself with, and you're like, no, please do not. I do not want anything of that. Kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Well, I mean, this does sort of continue the idea of in Gundam Wing, like the two kinds of interesting female character we do get is like the princess, who's sort of like the Relina type, and then the sort of the badass Sally annoying type, and like who's like very competent. And Karen is definitely that. I think Aina sort of has a lot of those princess tropes, but they make her a pilot, which is a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that as we go along, not so much in G Gundam, but some of the series after that, we're going to see the idea of, like, the same sort of idea that they're trying to go for Relina, expressed a lot more competently in characters like Lacus in Gundam Seed or Kudelia in Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Yeah, we actually, and I think this is our first female pilot, right? Like, we haven't had a female pilot up to this point. Or did we get one?
Well, not who's piloting
Noin.
like a super robot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, not a Gundam pilot.
Yeah,
Right.
like Noin and to a lesser extent Sally are both pilots, and Lady Un pilots a little bit.
While Noin didn't pilot an actual Gundam, she did pilot Zaku, which
Right.
is very similar.
But like we don't really see like I think that there may be some of the earlier series where we do get female new types and female new types piloting suits, but for what we've talked about, Aina's probably the most prominent female pilot we've seen so far.
Yeah, because she would be the one who had the first super robot, so to speak. Like, and I think, we'll get a little bit of it in Gundam G Gundam, but not in the type of way that is meaningful. Like, because she ends up, yeah, it's you
We get a weird Sailor Moon reference in G Gundam that I'm not sure how I feel about.
Yeah, there's a lot in G Gundam. Like, it's
G Gundam is not particularly progressive.
nope.
So strap in, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yes.
It's the Ruby Rod of Gundam series.
Oh, goodness.
Well, it's the
Okay.
Small World Ride of Gundam series. Let's be honest.
Yeah, okay, fair.
And that's what we will be tackling next.
Oh, I can't.
But does anyone else have more thoughts on the 8th MS team?
Nope, I'm out.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening. You can find all our show notes at our website, nostalgiapilots.com. My business is over at hughjodonald.com.
You can find all of mine over at skinner.fm.
And everything I do at nerdsandvoices.com.
And you can find me at resonantmoon.com.
Next time, a new world, a new life, a new Gundam series!
Gundam ready? Go!